Okay, well, we might get going then. Um, Hello, everyone. Welcome to Clear Strategies webinar on the risks of using Excel in a regulated environment. I'm Maeve Langton. As you can see, I am with Clear Strategy, so thanks for joining us this morning. So today we will discuss one of our clients. They're a well-established brand who were facing some significant challenges with some billing data that concerned over 1 million records. The challenge really came from an over-reliance on Excel. So despite kind of several attempts to overcome the challenge, the team were unable to solve the problem because there was such a vast amount of data and an unstructured approach. So clear strategy, our approach to the problem was really to come in with some automation and structured processes. And then we were able to identify and consolidate the discrepancies, allowing a reduction in errors by over 99%. So my colleague Martin, he is now going to talk us through a bit about how we achieve this transformation with our client. So I'll hand over to Martin, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks, mate. We're just going to play a little intro just to get people started, just to expand a little sound. So just it's about 30 seconds. So I'll just click play on this here. So in some respects, hopefully that might resonate with you a little bit in terms of some of the challenges you might be facing. I wanted to just talk for a moment about what reference data is, because we're going to be discussing reference data quite a bit today. And I think it's important just to understand what that is and what it might mean to you. So reference data is the key to ensuring that your data and your reporting are true and accurate. In the example that Maeve mentioned, our client's billing system wasn't matching with the record of the services provided to the customer. So the reference data wasn't linking correctly between the two systems. You might not call it reference data. It could be one of the terms we've got on screen here now that you're more familiar with. Essentially, reference data is what gives you standardization across your systems and gives you the ability to report consistently across the business, irrespective of the tools that you use. So how do we update reference data today? In many companies that we work with, it looks something like this. Lots of manual updates, emails back and forth, different people and teams involved. No proper ownership of the data, no proper record of who changed, what changed, and who changed it. In a word, inefficiency. What are the impacts of reporting errors or delays? Here are some well-known examples of companies that have incurred fines for misreporting. And as you can see, there's some significant fines here. As Maeve mentioned, we're working with a client recently where Excel formed a major part of their billing reconciliation and led to a significant error in their reporting. Fortunately, our client didn't get to this stage of compliance issues and regulatory fines, but they did have a number of challenges when it came to efficiently managing reporting. We see many organizations that are using tools that are not suited for the purpose of properly maintaining their reference data that is at the core of their reporting. When this core reference data is wrong, it has a significant impact on the accuracy of reporting. And because of the manual tools in place, it's not easy to correct. It can be very time consuming to make changes, and there's a lack of any audit trail to see who made changes and when. So if an error is made, it's very hard to identify what the error was, who made it, and then correct it. I've seen this process literally take weeks, if not months. So let's look at an example of what your reporting might look like when there is that reference data mismatch. This is just a screenshot. We're going to show you the live report later on, but this is an example of a Power BI dashboard where we can see that we've got a significant number of undefined transactions visible here in red. This is similar to what our customer experienced, where they knew there was a problem, but were not able to correct it. Here, our whole reporting is out because we've got data which is not being correctly classified against the right cost center. Taking our example workflow, which I ran through a few moments ago, this could take weeks to correctly identify what's wrong and amend it. Okay, welcome to Tempo. Tempo is our solution to managing reference data and avoid the headaches that we've outlined so far. This is our web-based interface, which provides users with the direct ability to modify reference data in your data platform. So I'm going to log in and select the relevant finance data set, which is feeding into my dashboard. So let's sign in. Bit of security. And now I'm just going to pick the relevant data set that I need. So my demo realm. And then I'm going to pick the database, which in this case is the finance data demo. And just expand this out. Okay, so this is showing me all the data that's directly in my data platform, in my case Snowflake, but it could be anything, any particular data platform. And I can see all the data that's here. I can see the transaction IDs, the cost center IDs, product classifications, general ledger codes, etc., etc. It's all there. Now, I'm only concerned today with the undefined data that's showing up as that red area in my report. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to filter on cost center ID. So pick that as my column, equals, and I want the cost center ID of undefined. Apply my filter. And now it's showing me all those unclassified lines in my data that are relating into that dashboard. So I can see them all here. In this particular instance today, for the purpose of the demo, I can see that all of them, as I scroll down, they've all got a product classification of operations. So somewhere along the line, there's been an error and that hasn't been translated into the cost center ID. So it hasn't moved across into there. So what we're going to do is I'm going to select all my lines and I'm going to pick to edit those rows. I'm going to pick the cost center ID column, and this has a drop down on it, so I can only pick from the ones that it can't enter text in here. So there's no possibility of entering in some third or some other unapproved cost center ID. So I'm going to pick operations in this instance because according to the product classification, these are all operations one, and I'm going to save the changes. So we can see the updates happening there live straight away. It's instantly updating them here in Tempo, instantly updating that in our data platform. And we'll see then on this view here that we have at the moment, eventually this view is going to have nothing on it because I'm currently still filtered on undefined. So once all my undefineds are gone, which is happening now, there's nothing left to see on this view. So great, I've got my I've got all my data correct now in Tempo. This is edited directly in my data platform. And now when I go back into my Power BI dashboard, we'll be able to see the updated report with the corrected reporting on it as everything is now correctly classified. So let's go back into Power BI. So here's our Power BI dashboard. We can still see it here before I refresh this. So this is set to refresh only when I pick it to, not before. So the data's changed in Tempo. Tempo's changed in our data platform. And once I hit refresh then on here, it'll update on here. Because I've been playing around with this a little bit, I just need to go in here to refresh that here. So I'm just going to pick this one here. Refresh this. We can see the little circle going around. And in a moment, then this should be refreshed and live. Yes, so there we go. That's refreshed now. Go back into my dashboard here. And just hit refresh on this. And now we can see what's happened. So all my undefined that were here in red and over here in red, they've all changed. There's an increase in my operations, number of transactions, my cost center per operations, because I've moved all those additional transactions into that operations column. My undefineds have all gone. Everything is back to normal and correct. So great news. All my errors are fixed. My data is clean and accurate. Job's done. And what I want to look at here now is our tracker. So the good news, we spoke earlier about the lack of an audit trail in existing tools. In Tempo, the great news is that we've got a full audit trail and we can see all the changes that have been made, when they're made, and who by. So let me just sort this by date. So we can see the changes that I made. So we look here now, here we are. This is me in Tempo on the finance demo dataset in the data demo table. and I made an update today at 10:39. So we can see exactly who made a change, what change they made, and when. And I can click in and see more details beyond that then as well. So that means that we've got that audit trail. We have the ability then to roll it back if necessary, if there's been an error made, but at least we can see what has made a change to our data. So again, when it comes to correcting errors in the future, we can see the change that was made, who it was made by, and we've got the ability to correct it. So I know what you're thinking now. Can any user just log in to Tempo and make changes to my data? I'm not sure I want that. This is where roles and permissions then come into it. So we're going to look here now for a moment in the user manager section, and I'm going to look into roles. So this is where I can set up a particular role, assign people to those roles, and then give them permissions based on their role. So I'm just going to add a role here at the moment. We've got some existing ones there, an example, a sales and operations role. I'm going to add a new role here, and we're going to call it finance. And then I'm going to add a user to the role. So I'm going to add Aoife to that role. Select that here, save that, and now I've created a new finance role. I can add as many users as I want to that role. Obviously, people from the finance team I'm going to put into that role. So that's great. I've got that defined. Then what I can do, I can go into permissions, and here I can look at my role and I can edit it and define what level of access the users in that role have, and that determines then what they can and can't do with the system. So we can see, for example, here currently in the finance role, they have access to the following data sets, the following tables, and they have the ability to display information, to update information, but they don't have the authority to insert or to delete information. So we've got control over what they can and can't do. So they can make changes, but they can't put in new data, they can't delete data. Then obviously I can edit this. I can select the particular database or tables they've got access to. So at the moment, it's just the finance one. I could add additional data sets if necessary, or indeed additional tables within that particular data set as well, if that was required. And one last thing that we can do on that then as well is we can enable a sign-off and approval workflow, where if they're making a change, it might need to be signed off by another user. So we've got that further level of control there as well. So that's let's leave Tempo for a moment. Let's just come back to our slides then for a second, and we'll talk a little further in terms of what we've got to. Sorry, I'm gonna have to just go back up here to my demo. Come back into slides. So that was our Tempo demo, real quick, real short, but hopefully gave you an insight into what happens with Tempo. Let's just talk back then for a moment about what our workflow was like before Tempo and what it's like afterwards. So this is what I showed you earlier in terms of the current process about updating it and the long and tortured process involved in that. What's it look like now? This is what our new workflow looks like. So this is what we did for the client Maeve mentioned at the start, bringing structure and governance to 1.2 million previously unmanageable entries. Changes are made directly into your data platform, and all the downstream tools that rely on this master reference data are instantly and automatically updated. One change, multiple systems amended, and all feeding into your reporting tools. Simple, streamlined, and efficient. That's it for me for the moment. Maeve, I'm going to hand back over to you. I think there might have been some questions. Apologies, I can't see the questions on the screen, so maybe you might just read them out there, and we can do our best to address those.
Okay, great. Yeah, there's a couple of questions already in the chat, and then yeah, feel free to keep writing them in if anybody has any. The Q&A function doesn't work for some reason in this, so chat is perfect. So the first question we have is my data retained in Tempo?
Yeah, great question. Obviously, your data is important to you. You need to have security about who can access it and who can control it. And we've got within Tempo, we've got some ability to do that. Your info is not retained in Tempo. No, it's Tempo acts as a controlled interface for editing the data that lives in your enterprise data warehouse, whether that's Snowflake or Azure or GCP or whatever it might be. So it's temporarily stored only to support the user workflow, but you maintain full ownership and control over data at all times. Changes are logged, and then they're written back to your governed source system, so not retained in Tempo, no.
Okay. And then what platforms can be integrated with Tempo?
Yes, I mentioned it briefly there. So the great news with Tempo is it's pretty agnostic when it comes to platforms. So today we're using it connected to Snowflake, but it can be connected to Microsoft Azure, AWS, Databricks. It doesn't matter. Tempo is pretty agnostic when it comes to the particular data platform that you might be using.
Okay. And then how did Tempo recognize the undefined data reference as operations?
Yeah, so that was just an example we were given there. So the way I was able to identify it there was from the product classification that was against those particular errors. So in that example, it was pretty easy for me to do. Um, so I could see it was against that. There's obviously there's deeper ways we could do that. We could look in more detail. We could filter maybe additionally against it. See, we could put in multiple filters to filter against department or filter against user or any other criteria you might have. So an example today, it was a product classification, which was operations, which told me that it was cost center of operations. So it was quite an easy example today.
Yeah, so it's not figuring out the issue, it's giving you the tool to push the issue to your downstream process.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, and then what industries will this solution work with?
Yeah, another good question. So, like today, we were focusing on, I guess, more of a finance use case in terms of a cost center and the impact that was having. And obviously, most businesses have some sort of finance function. So, in terms of industry, again, Tempo can be used with any industry where you've got a data platform, you've got reference data, you've got reporting. So, we've got it in place with financial services, telecoms, insurance, retail, manufacturing. So again, it doesn't really matter what the industry is. It's more about the reference data and the data platform where you might put Tempo in place.
Okay. And then, so how long does it take to get set up?
Yeah, it's pretty simple, pretty straightforward to get Tempo implemented. Roughly between 3 and 5 days is what we're looking at. And that's to set up the connection, validate it, make sure all the authorizations and logins and so on are correct, and then training your team as well to make sure they can get used to Tempo and make the most from it and really enable them with the technology we're putting in place.
Okay. Let me see. And then is there any AI functionality? Obviously, that's a trendy topic.
Yeah, very trendy, obviously, at the moment. We are working on AI functionality at the moment. What we're looking to do there, we hope to have it in place pretty soon. It's on the roadmap and it's being worked on currently, is to give you assistance within Tempo about the data that you're looking at. So it's going to be contextual in terms of suggesting potentially improvements you might want to make or changes you might want to make, helping you with recurring operations that you might be doing, that type of thing. So very much on the roadmap. We hope to have something in place in the coming months in that respect.
Okay, brilliant. And then how is data protected in Tempo? So some
Yeah,
security.
yeah, indeed important in terms of that protection. Like we've mentioned, your data is really important and the security around it is really important. So we use industry standard encryption protocols to protect your data. So it's protected and encrypted in transit using TLS 1.2 encryption. So that's between your system and Tempo. And then at rest, it's encrypted using Microsoft Azure enterprise grade encryption. And then finally, the connection credentials are securely stored using Azure Key Vault. So we have lots of protection in there around your data.
Okay. And then is Tempo compliant with regulatory standards?
Yeah, so it's built on Microsoft Azure, so it inherits basically the compliance posture of Microsoft Azure. So that includes certifications for GDPR, for ISO 27001, and SOC 1, 2, and 3. We've got a full security pack, which I'm more than happy to share with anyone afterwards, which goes into more detail on any of that. So if you do have any further questions around that, more than happy to talk you through that.
Okay. And then can Tempo provide Tempo work without a data platform?
Can Temple provide? Yes, I mean you could upload data into Tempo, I guess, and edit it there. Our focus has been on connecting it to a data platform. I suppose it's a question of where is your data today? So I'd love to understand a little more about that. So maybe I'm not sure who's asked that question, but love to chat with you more about that and understand where your data is today and what challenges you're having, and then we could certainly have a look at how we could best help you with that.
Okay, perfect. So we can follow up. And then there's one more question, so feel free to keep writing them in. We have a few more minutes. How can we integrate Tempo with our existing single sign-on?
Yes, you might have noticed there when I signed into Tempo originally, I had two options for signing. I had a Tempo ID or I had a single sign-on with Microsoft. So we can integrate Tempo with your single sign-on, whatever particular single sign-on you have in place. So Azure or Okta or whatever it might be, so to enforce your organization's authentication policies. So absolutely, we can match in with the policies you already have in place in that respect.
Okay. And then the final one, how does Tempo help prevent unauthorized changes?
Yeah, so basically with the version control, you saw there we had the tracker. So we can see, and then with the roles and permissions as well. So we can define who has access to it. We can define what data sets they've got access to, and then we can also determine what level of access they can have. So what data sets they can access, what changes they can make to that, and then further than that, we can also allow or put in an authorization or a sign off. So not only so they can make the change that they've given access to, but can still require a further level of sign off before it actually makes the change. So lots of control around that, and you can vary that then by team or by role or by individual if you want to. And then obviously because it's tracked, if somebody makes a change that they weren't supposed to, or they didn't have, they were given the wrong permissions, then obviously we have the ability to roll that back as well. So we've got, because the tracking is there, and that's such an important point, because the tracking is there, that audit trail is there, we've got the ability to roll things back, which is a big hole, a big lack in current tools that we see is, yeah, change might be made, but how do we find out what happens? So Tempo really gives us a lot of control around that.
Okay. And then one more for you, Martin. How is the product licensed? Per user or per tenant, or how does that work?
Yeah, sure. It's on a per user basis. More than happy to discuss with you your particular requirements around that and what you need. But it is on a per user basis. We have a minimum number of seats, and it's a 12-month license typically. So I'd love to chat with you further about that, and we can find a solution that works for you and your team.
Okay, amazing. That's all the questions for now, but I mean, for myself and Martin, we definitely see that everyone's data workflows are unique. So if you're facing any kind of challenges with your master data and are looking for a more like customized demo, you can supply a sample data or anything like that. Feel free to reach out to myself or Martin, and we'd love to get that set up. So some great questions there, and thanks everybody for kind of getting in touch. Yes, we will share the presentation and the recording afterwards. So everyone who attended will get a copy of that. So yeah, thanks for your question. But yeah, I hope everybody got a good understanding then of Tempo and how about data professionals and business users can update. It really cuts out that kind of wrestling with like massive spreadsheets or any kind of SQL queries that need to be run. And then, yeah, in terms of apologies for the Power BI error, I have been told that our Power BI is having issues connecting to our Snowflake, which is why our Tempo update isn't feeding into our visuals. So apologies for that. Obviously, it happened during the live demonstration. So we can follow up with everyone on that. So yeah, if that's all the questions, we are 2 minutes away. So thank you so much for joining. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, everybody. And said any questions you got afterwards, more than happy to address those or in any further detail, or we can have more than happy to address your particular use case. So thanks very much for joining us today, and hope to see you again soon.